In the past couple of years, thanks to wokeness, we have had quite a few games that have died in literally a week. And a lot of games that have died in literally days after release, which is astonishing. And some of these games had quite a lot of hype around them. Concord, Unknown 9, Dragon Age the Veilguard. Well, okay, all of those games had a lot of I wonder how fast this is gonna die hype around them, but hype nonetheless. Let's see some amazing examples of slop.
Sometimes gamers hype up a project. Other times, the publishers hype it up by pumping millions of dollars into advertisements. But what about the games that were hyped up like crazy one way or another, and then they completely fell on their face? What's up, everybody? Jimmy or Chaos. Today, we're going to be talking about 10 overhyped games that died on launch day. These are those games that had so much buzz surrounding them leading up to the release, either from gamers on social media, creator influencers, or...
By the way, you should recognize what this is. This is Concord. Does this look fun? No. No, it does not. Did you know that this was supposed to be the next GTA? And that Sony had to pay $400 million to acquire this studio because they fucking fell hook, line, and sinker for this shit? They literally bought into the hype that this is gonna overthrow GTA as the next crown jewel. Modern warfare? Yeah. Concord was supposed to be the next big thing. Well, 99 of their player peak was literally their devs playing it on day one. This shit died in less than 24 hours.
From publishers spamming advertisements everywhere. But then once they came out, nobody cared. So you let me know which of these overhyped games you actually played, spent money on, and then, well, you got kind of bamboozled with. Drop a like on the video. At number 10, Fallout 76. Now, I know the game is popular now, and Bethesda did a good job at reviving it, but back...
It's not popular. It's not. It has never truly been popular. It's doing better than Starfield, but it is one of the lowest games ever. It's a live service, so it has a little bit more players. But it's not popular. There was never a resurgence in Fallout 76. And we literally looked at it like 2 times in the past week. It's shit. The dialogue especially, like, this game started with no NPCs, by the way. You were alone in your depression, okay? There was nothing to talk to except maybe a flying Roomba here and there. And then they added NPCs. NPCs that are written so poorly, you wish they didn't add them. Holy.
Back when it first launched, this was one of the biggest flops in gaming history. In terms of player counts and community, Fallout 76's drop-off after launch was one of the biggest ever for a video game. And the fact that it was part of such a huge franchise, it just made it sting a little more.
True. Bethesda literally put this shit on Steam, by the way, because they needed extra players. The Bethesda launcher doesn't exist anymore.
Upon release, Fallout 76 barely functioned, and even when it was working, there was hardly anything to do. It was boring, it was busted. It had none of the charm the Fallout community had come to expect from Bethesda.
True.
Over the next 5 to 6 years, Bethesda did a pretty good job at getting everything back on track.
And again, I'm not... When people say this game was buggy at launch, they didn't play it. I played it. I played this shit when it launched, boys. I can tell you the horrors. Your FPS was tied to your movement speed. So if you looked at the ground, you could zoom places, okay? Every second mob you encountered T-posed or had a stretched neck. Power armor made you into a freak. Everything here was bad. Every 30 seconds playing this game, you literally encountered a game-breaking bug that completely ruined your immersion. Fallout 76 was not bad. People found ways to spawn in. What's the blimp called in Fallout 4? I forgot. Anyway, they found a way to spawn that into the game. People found a way to glitch into the developer segments of the... It was a mess. An absolute mess. It was so bad.
Track, they revived the community, but the initial flop of Fallout 76 was absolutely one of the biggest cases.
They never did. Again, Fallout 76 has like 7K players, which I guess is pretty decent for an old game, but not really. Not really.
Of overhype in gaming history. Before we move on, guys, if you get anything from G2A.com, use the link below and save yourself. At number 9, Star Wars Outlaws. Now, Outlaws is reportedly one of the biggest AAA flops of the decade. I have a kind of a personal history with this.
How much did they sell at the end? How many copies? 500K? 1 million? 2 million? I don't remember. I have black holed almost everything about this travesty of a game. And by the way, Ubisoft title.
Ubisoft announced this open world Star Wars game, and a lot of us were excited. Star Wars has never had a proper single-player open-world game like this, and Ubisoft seemed to be a solid choice of a company to handle it. Now,
and it never did.
Fortunately, the game we got was pretty shallow, super repetitive. It offered basically nothing unique compared to other open-world games on the market. It also didn't help that this game launched at a time when Star Wars hype was at an all-time low, and the hype for a new AAA open-world game was actually starting to die out. Outlaws were...
Nah, all of that is not a problem. The reason why people were not excited for this game, because we saw the trailers that they put out. The shooting was bad, the dialogues were boring and stupid, the character design is literally ugly. This is one of the most ugly characters in gaming. And this is one of the trends that we are going to see probably often in this video. It's the fact that there's going to be a lot of very disgusting, ugly female character leads. And the funny part is, this character was based off of a woman that's actually very hot. She does look good. And that's going to be the same trend for a lot of games, I feel. Because this is literally going to be the Ubisoft BioWare Blizzard list.
Reportedly had a budget of 200 to 300 million, but only sold around a million.
There is no way. Reportedly 300 million budget. Lies. Absolute lies. There is no way. There's absolutely no way the budget was anything below 500 million for this. No way. No single fucking way. Okay? We already have, by the way, news that this was confirmed to be at least 400 million, if I'm not wrong. But again, there is no way this was below 500 million. That part I do remember. This was one of the most expensive games with all of the shit that they did, and it's a complete flop.
Million copies, which is a lot of copies for sure, but it's also no...
Wait, how much?
300 million, but only sold around a million copies, which is...
Yeah, that seems about right. It's a disaster.
A lot of copies for sure, but it's also nowhere near the kind of numbers Ubisoft needed in order to turn a profit. And that's pretty embarrassing that a Star Wars game with that much marketing was barely able to break...
By the way, the marketing is even a separate conversation here, because this was reported to be Ubisoft's biggest marketing push by a landslide.
7 figures on the units sold. Huge swing and a huge miss from Ubisoft, and I actually got flown out by Ubisoft to play this and see it. And I'll tell you right now, aside from the game, the event was absolutely amazing, but the game, it just didn't live up. At number 8.
We talked about this, by the way. This is just lathering up. They didn't pay them to have their chill opinions, but I mean, they put them in the most expensive places, and when they got at the end of the day to their hotel rooms, there was probably a prostitute or two on the beds with a pile of cash. Well, that's just there at random, dude. If you want to keep it, keep it. You know, so so this is not paid advertisement, which is stupid.
Rainbow Six Extraction. Raise your hand if you don't remember this. Siege was one of the biggest new FPS games of the entire decade, and a few years after release, Ubisoft announced a spin-off called Rainbow Six Quarantine, but after 2020 came along, they decided, well, let's change that name to Rainbow Six Extraction. As opposed to being a mostly realistic tactical shooter like the rest of the franchise, Extraction was a sci-fi FPS where you played as various members of the team killing aliens and completing objectives. The gameplay was pretty basic. It also had nothing to do with Rainbow Six in the first place, which may have been why it died almost instantly on launch day. The game peaked at less than 2,400 players on Steam and has a 30-day peak of only 42 concurrent players. A shout out to those 42 people. Ubisoft has been having a lot of financial trouble over the last few years, and Extraction was one of the first big budget flops that set them on that downward spiral. At number 7, Marvel's The Avengers. This should have been a live service game starring the...
God. By the way, And people say that, oh, Marvel Rivals is only successful because of Marvel IP. You understand that Marvel Rivals is one of 2 successful Marvel IPs in the last, I don't know, 20 games that they have did? People are so dumb. Oh, it's successful because it's a Marvel IP. Obviously, it's going to succeed. Bro, the Marvel IPs in games have like a 10% success rate currently. It's a fucking disaster.
Avengers that would only be coming out a couple years after Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. This should have been a smash hit, but it was mishandled at basically every opportunity in every corner. It ended up being a massive letdown, and Square Enix ended up dropping support for it way ahead of schedule. Instead of making the characters look like their movie counterparts or leaning into more comic book inspired aesthetics, the game decided to use realistic graphics and character models, but really ugly stunt doubles for all the iconic heroes, which that's just a strange choice. The game also launched full of technical issues, and the optimization problems were across every platform. It also didn't help that the gameplay was repetitive and boring. Definitely not the kind of thing you would expect to have an Avengers logo.
Yeah, this was just a cash grab
On the box for. Marvel's The Avengers was a massive financial disappointment for publisher Square Enix, and the game that should have been a runaway success ended up being one of the biggest live service flops in gaming history. At number 6, what happened? Skull and Bones. It was another game that really...
Well, you know what happened? You decided... Ubisoft decided that they're gonna put a bunch of women on a pirate ship. Now, I ain't no historian, but you know why they didn't do that? Because, 50 or however many men on a ship and one woman or a couple of women, and, being out in sea for, maybe a week or 2 at a time, or probably even more, it's probably not gonna end up for the women when they're surrounded by fucking bandits, murderers, and cutthroats. Maybe. Just maybe. But this is like, everything is a woman, especially the ones that load cannons. And that's just the wokeness part of this, which is kind of hilarious, honestly. But I mean, everything else about this game is also horrible. Skull and Bones is, you're a pirate captain or something like that, and you get to go out and do marvelous adventures that are really boring, and then you get loot, and the loot is wooden planks and screws most of the time. Maybe cannonballs if you're lucky. You can't even fucking get cold in this game. Or maybe you could, I don't remember. But it's like, oh, you're a pirate ransacking other ships. Here's your reward. 5 screws and 3 gears and 7 wood. Have fun, chief. That is just boring.
Should have been an easy slam dunk, but it ended up being one of the most expensive failures in gaming history. Open world pirate game. That's all I need to say.
This game was also like 400 or 500 million down the drain, and the story about this is hilarious because fucking Malaysia, the Malaysian government did this deal with Ubisoft. Ubisoft literally got to develop this for free. The Malaysian government paid every penny for this game. Well, they gave them a budget that Ubisoft said, yeah, this is gonna work out, and they literally did nothing with this for years, and then remade it like 50 billion times. And then Ubisoft was in the situation, well, we kind of spent all the Malaysian government's money that they gave us, and now, since we can't really say no to a country, I guess we're just gonna have to spend our money, and that's how they spent 500 million on a game that literally should have costed them 0. Fun stuff.
Hey, that...
And this game most likely has had a peak player base of something, I don't know, I'm kind of guessing, but maybe 3K if we're being very generous, because we don't know the numbers. But this game is so trash, no one probably played it.
In itself is awesome. Started development in 2013, changed vision and direction several times before settling on the version that ended up dropping in 2024 to horrendous sales numbers and average at best reviews. The concept of the game is basically an expansion of the ship mechanics from Assassin's Creed 4, but instead of actually making things deeper and more technical, Skull and Bones made them lamer and much less engaging. They also removed all the other stuff that AC4 had that was good, so we ended up getting a snooze fest of a pirate game that absolutely nobody wanted to play. Yep. Ubisoft really thought this was going to be a long-term success. They put millions upon millions of dollars into marketing.
By the way, the funny part is they're still not giving up. This shit is getting an expansion.
Once it came out, it was a huge flop. Ubisoft ended up losing at least 8 figures on it, which was not the kind of big...
Look at this. Look at this. Actual loot. Fine jute. No one knows what that is. Maybe it's edible. A grilled bread. 112 silver. This is like probably the most exciting loot I have ever seen in my life. And a lamb cloth. The fuck is a lamb cloth? Like, what a time to be a pirate.
Budget release they needed for 2024. This is one of the biggest flops in gaming history. At number 5.
And by the way, it shows you the loot, which makes it just not interesting, because now it's like, oh, this is not worth my time.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5. The Pro Skater series was one of the best sports franchises in gaming history, and they are widely responsible for a lot of people getting into skateboarding and punk rock in the late 90s and early 2000s. I'm willing to bet at least a few of you discovered your favorite band from one of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games, but I'm also willing to bet at least a few of you tried Pro Skater 5 and you instantly uninstalled it. It was rushed through development for contractual reasons. No, I'm not kidding. Was released completely broken and didn't have any features. There was even a day one patch that was even bigger than the game itself, because that's how many bugs there were in the original 1.0 version of the game. The gameplay was horrible, physics were broken, soundtrack sucked, and it was a stain on the otherwise amazing franchise. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 was one of the worst reviewed games of 2015 despite the hype surrounding the franchise, and it ended up absolutely destroying the Tony Hawk.
Dude, I remember Tony... what was it, the Tony... I don't even remember, was it the Tony Hawk game, but... When I was a kid, and this is like the 5th or... I think this is the 5th or 6th grade or something like that. I had one friend who literally could get billions and score. At that age. That was pretty impressive, okay? You're like playing against him, and he's like, okay, who's gonna get the biggest score? Well, he does a trick that gets literally a billion or trillion in score. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, no one could rival him.
Hawk video game series until the remasters of Pro Skater 1 and 2 got things back on track. Go back to the good stuff. At number 4, Battleborn. Back when Overwatch was first gearing up for launch, there was another upcoming hero-based shooter from Gearbox, seemingly going to be its main competition.
Oh, I remember this. This was so shit.
Now, I have no idea why we all decided that Battleborn was going to be a competitor to Overwatch, because they're actually really two different games, but it was a direct comparison to Overwatch that largely contributed to Battleborn only lasting a few months before being shut down.
Honestly, I don't remember any hype about this.
While Overwatch's popularity, I mean, it skyrocketed, it soared. Both games.
I heard about this, but it never sounded that... Was there actual hype about this?
Games were released in 2016. But while Overwatch was immediately popular thanks to its refined and competitive gameplay loop that was perfect for both casual and competitive FPS players, Battleborn got more mixed reviews because it was more complicated, less focused. The design was a lot harder to get into. So Overwatch had a great start while Battleborn stumbled, and then as the months went by and everybody constantly compared the two games, Battleborn didn't stand a chance. It's kind of like where Overwatch is now against Marvel rivals. The game transitioned to a free-to-play model less than a year after launch, and then a few years after that, the servers went dark. Gearbox has been struggling to find their footing over the last decade or so, but I'm hoping
Isn't Gearbox pretty much dead at this point?
Borderlands 4 is the answer.
I mean, Borderlands 4 is not the answer. It looks like a woke mess, okay? Even the one white Nordic character that's supposed to be in the game looks more black than white because reasons. See it.
At number 3, Anthem. It's honestly sad what happened to BioWare over the last...
I did not cover Anthem. I honestly know almost nothing about Anthem.
Last decade. These guys...
I mean, when we're talking about the failures of this company, I fucking forget to bring up Anthem.
Used to be some of the most respected RPG developers in the gaming industry, but now they just kind of seem like a has-been. First, there was the horrible disappointment of Mass Effect Andromeda, and then they followed that up with...
To summarize how bad Ubisoft is doing... Ubisoft? BioWare? But whatever. Whichever company owned Anthem. Again, I forget that this even exists. But that company is currently, at the bare minimum, just in the last year, minus $2 billion probably in debt. From all their disasters. Minimum! Because they have... it's not even funny how bad it's going.
Anthem, a looter shooter that was absolutely nothing like their previous games, and that was so boring and so lame that EA had to pull the plug on it 2 years after launch despite spending hundreds of millions of dollars on it. The story of Anthem had some potential. Clear that BioWare was doing their best to weave their great writing and RPG roots into the experience where they could.
Which is bullshit, because there is one thing I do remember about this game, that pretty much 99% of this game got made in the last 3 months.
But the core gameplay, it was so horribly derivative of Destiny and The Division, it just wasn't fun. Especially after BioWare started strangely patching out all the popular grinding spots and making the game even more tedious than it was before. Anthem did have a small, loyal community of dedicated fans for a while, but it only took a few months for everyone to see this game was beyond saving. It stumbled hard on its way out the door by providing forgettable gameplay and so many technical issues across all platforms that there wasn't any recovering from the start, especially while games like Warframe and Destiny 2 were just absolutely crushing it. Anthem never stood a chance. At number 2, Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. Might be a little unfair to put this game on the list because we all knew it was going to flop, but then again, Warner Brothers really thought they had a hit on their hands, so here it is.
Beautiful.
I mean, it was the latest game in the Arkhamverse, and instead of being a well-written and tightly designed single-player stealth
It's so boring. Like, look at this traversal.
action game, it was a multiplayer live service shooter, looter shooter with horrible writing, annoying characters, grindy gameplay, and no appeal to fans of the franchise. Warner Brothers reportedly lost over $200 million on this game, and they've officially pulled support for it less than a year after launch. For such a
You know what's the funny part about this game? Because I followed it closely. I love it. So, it had 4? Yeah, it was 4 expansions. So, the first expansion was Mrs. Freeze. Trans Mrs. Freeze or whatever. Then it was Deadshot's daughter. I don't know, some kind of black girl. Oh, but before that, it was their attempt at... Their first thing, by the way. Their first expansion was a winked out modern day pronoun Joker, which was disgusting. And that symbolized Dan, because that Joker didn't even have interactions with Harley Quinn. It's just like, that's it. And he was locked behind an absolute massive grind, or a paywall, if you will. So have fun with that. And again, after it was Mrs. Freeze, Sans Freeze, by the way. No one even knows what that is. There's literally a rainbow flag skin for that, so 10 out of 10 right there, right? And then it was Deadshot's daughter, not Deathstrike. And she was annoying, but you know, you need strong, independent women of color, so 10 out of 10. And after, when the game fucking died, you actually had Deathstrike. They literally gave you a reasonable, good character at the end of the game, but it was dead. That is hilarious. That is just hilarious.
huge budget game with such aggressive marketing, the player counts for Suicide Squad were embarrassing, and Warner Brothers really screwed up letting this see the light of day in the state it was. Honestly, they would have been better off canceling the game outright.
Also, look at this game. It's like, whoever made this fucking city has autism. They just put stuff at random locations because of nothing. This is one of the most poorly made map cities ever seen in gaming history. It's just a bunch of shit for no reason. There's like this sky bridge thingamajig that God knows why. It's just so bad. Nothing in the city makes sense. It's just an eyesore.
Reallocating all those resources to a proper Arkham game because the amount of damage this game did to the Arkham brand may not be recoverable. Rocksteady has had a perfect record, and then after almost a decade of waiting,
I mean, Rocksteady is cooked also at this point because not a single person who made the good Gotham games is left at Rocksteady. People were instantaneously, oh, this is going to be bad because Rocksteady makes Gotham games, not the live service stuff. Oh, please, they can try and make a game, but the fact is, no one with any shred of talent is left at Rocksteady when this game got built. So even if they made a new Gotham game, it would flop. Because it would be bad, it would be horrible. Because not a single person is left who actually made the previous games. It's over.
they released this. And at number 1 today, Concord. Easily the biggest overhyped flop of all time. A hero shooter published by Sony.
No, I actually talked about this at the start. 400 million acquisition. And for what? Nothing. Literally nothing. 99% of the players day one were people who worked at Concord. Toxic positivity, work culture, extremely woke, as you can see from this. Game mechanics that don't make sense. For example, that after the first round, you can't pick the same character you were previously playing because fucking reasons. Slow movement, extremely tanky characters, like very long time to kill, slow, sluggish, boring, bad abilities, bad balancing, and very, very sad indeed. The wokeness in Concord was, 10 out of 10. How you have fat things and creatures, it's just sad. Anyway, that's Concord for you. In any case, that was Chaos. 10 out of 10. Bye bye.